You're listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
We're honored to have our esteemed colleague and good friend Mark Langfan join us back on the Final Say. For those of you who haven't heard, with pleasure and a bit of sadness, but for those who haven't heard Mark before, Mark's an attorney in New York and a frequent contributor to Middle East affairs, focused on Israel security issues, etc. But Mark's friends know him as the Map Man because he has for decades now been providing a series of three-dimensional topographical maps that, simplest way I could say it, animate the implications of geography and even geology on Israel's security and really raise the question of, is a two-state solution in any way that it's been structured by the powers that be for quite some time now really possible? Now, Mark, in prior conversations, we've spoken at length about a lot of these issues, okay? But it's with great displeasure that I invited you on the show today, no insult intended, but because your prognostications, that's easy for me to say, have once again been proven accurate. And, of course, I'm speaking about the FAA and the EU's decision to ban flights to and from Ben-Gurion, Israel's only real port of access. Mark, what does this mean for the state of Israel, and where do you see this going if in the near future, and what are the long-term implications?
Well, let me, I would like to take credit that I was right, but I have to say there might be another more sinister aspect to the FAA ban on flights to Israel. And that sinister possibility might be that Obama is putting the hammer down on Israel to force Israel into some kind of horrifically bad ceasefire. Now, let's understand exactly what prompted this FAA ban. Some shrapnel dropped out of the sky and hit a city about 5 kilometers away from Ben-Gurion, which is about 3 miles from Ben-Gurion. Now, I can, from the looks of it, it certainly looks like the decision by the FAA was taken totally against Israeli experts' evaluations about whether there was a danger or not. So there is a possibility that Obama is using this as a weapon against Israel to basically create a boycott, a quote-unquote peace boycott, not P-E-A-C-E, P-E-I-C-E boycott, in that there was always a boycott of, the EU. But this is a boycott where Israel, is from the rockets, is in fact boycotted. And it is given, in effect, a huge victory for Hamas. Because now Hamas is in an incredibly much more powerful position than it was 2 hours ago or 3 hours ago before this happened. Now they've got a huge hammer on Israel because all they have to do is tactically hunker down and keep firing these things one every hour in the general direction of Ben-Gurion Airport, and they've closed down virtually the entire Israeli economy. So, tourism is 5%, but the cascading effect of the tourism shutdown and the hysteria that is now probably happening in Israel because people can't get out of Israel, people can't come back to Israel, it is profound. It's like a bad news story. The rockets did to some extent threaten Tel Aviv, the greater Tel Aviv area, and hence, of course, Ben-Gurion. but it isn't clear yet whether this was an assault by Obama on the state of Israel, quite apart from Hamas's assault on Israel.
Well, it's an interesting assertion, and it actually was one of the things that struck my mind. You can make the argument in light of MH17 a few days back over Ukraine, and you can certainly see where, from an airline's perspective, somebody like Delta might say, hey, we're going to hold off for 24, 48 hours, even a week or so. So let's not necessarily debate whether that's prudent for the airlines, for the CEOs to make, but I do think that it may be a slap in the face to punish Israel, or at minimum to force her to accept another temporary ceasefire. Now, where I really want to go...
This plays into the ceasefire. I mean, it just so happened that the very morning Kerry got to Cairo, all of a sudden the FAA comes out with this warning. But I want to sort of talk about a different effect that this is going to have, because we always have to look at the short term and the long term effect, and we can't get swept away by the instant. And what's the instant? Oh, there was a rocket and the FAA closed Israel down. Well, you know what, everybody? Could you imagine the way I'm going to be writing this one up as an article is the FAA and Obama just saved Israel. Now, how did the FAA save Israel? Well, you know what the FAA just told Israel? The FAA just told Israel that if there is a stray rock, and you have to understand something, from the Gaza Strip to Ben-Gurion is about 50 to 60 miles. Okay? So, this is the gig. If you're playing golf, everybody, and you have to make a tee shot that's 50 miles away, can you imagine the kind of shot you have to hit in order to make a hole-in-one? And that is essentially what those rockets have to do in order to hit Ben-Gurion Airport. Okay? They've got to go 50 miles off the tee, and even the slightest, if it's 1% off, if it's a 0.5%, there's almost no margin for error. It is virtually an impossible shot from the Gaza Strip. So what happened is a little shrapnel fell 3 miles away from Ben-Gurion, and the FAA closes down Israel as tight as a drum. Okay? Now, what happens if the Palestinians get a West Bank Palestinian state? And they smuggle in not these, because you got to understand something. Everybody, the rockets that they're firing, there's two essential type of rockets. Diameter, about the diameter of a CD player, like a CD, record CD that you buy in the store. It's about 4.5 inches in diameter. The rockets that are reaching Tel Aviv and further has a diameter of about a foot. And the short-range rockets, the total weight of the rocket for two terrorists to carry is about 100 pounds. Matter of fact, it can really be carried by one person. The rockets that are hitting Tel Aviv and Ben-Gurion, they weigh about 1,700 pounds. They are 20 feet tall. They need trucks. They need huge, huge trucks. They need huge... Okay, we're not talking a Roman candle here. We're talking a huge missile. And so the point is that in the West Bank, they wouldn't need these 20-foot missiles that when you hit a tee shot, you have to hit it better than Tiger Woods ever hit any tee shot in his life. All they need is these small little Katyusha Qassams to hit Ben-Gurion Airport and to close Ben-Gurion down. So we're not talking about these huge missiles from the Gaza Strip. We're talking one Katyusha rocket from Qalqilia or from the Jerusalem to Tel Aviv area in the West Bank into anywhere near Ben-Gurion will close the whole state of Israel down. And what that really means is we have hit the end of the peace process. Because if the FAA is going to close Israel down over a rocket from the Gaza Strip, by golly, what are they going to do when there's a Katyusha rocket from the West Bank? And this is going to have reverberations that will scare the bejesus out of any Israeli government now. Because if this action was taken, and it appears to be, because the environment, the aviation, the transportation minister of Israel, Minister Katz, came out against the FAA regulation, FAA ban, and said it was unnecessary and it was a victory for terrorism. So, where we are is, yes, this is bad. It's bad for Israel. I have not been convinced yet on the evidence that it was a necessary decision. Nevertheless, it is going to have a profound impact on any negotiations on the future, because if this closed Israel down, by golly, one Katyusha rocket from anywhere in the West Bank, where you don't have to be a Tiger Woods. You could be like me, hitting a golf ball. I mean, I don't hit a golf ball, backwards, and I don't hit it sideways, but anywhere in front, a little bit. Even if I top the ball, it'll create a FAA. Because who is going to travel to an airport? You got to remember, there's a huge difference between the rockets that are getting fired and the Katyushas. The Katyushas that have been being fired have these ball bearings in them. And these ball bearings spread out and blow little holes through anything that are in their path that is metal, or if it's skin, of course it goes through skin too. In fact, when people are looking at the damage from these rockets, they should always look to see if it looks like that it was a lot of little balls. If you look for it, a lot of times you'll see the telltale sign of these little balls. And those balls would go through a 747 on the tarmac of Ben-Gurion like a hot knife through butter.
You're absolutely right, because let's face it, these are anti-personnel, they're terror weapons more than they are effective military weapons. But
exactly.
Right, but Mark, as you point out, effective military weapons, a lot of these shoulder-fired man-pads, as they call them, and similar weapons they're no-brainers. You turn it on, it's got a battery.
And that's the other one.
Right, it's like a video game. You wait for it to give you the green light on target, you press the button, and kaboom. And Mark, before I let you jump back in, I want to point out that if you average the rockets that have been fired, I don't have the exact number, but I'm looking at the charts and doing some quick math in my head, you're probably averaging somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,100 rockets a year since the terrorists hit our towers in 9/11. There's
16,000 since 2001, which is really when they started, because everyone should understand why they started. They started because Israel built a wall and didn't allow the terrorists easy access to commit suicide bombing. So they morphed, and they said,
that wasn't particularly thoughtful, Mark.
What?
Gee, that wasn't particularly thoughtful on Israel's behalf.
Yeah, I mean, they denied that suicide... I always joke around that when the first thing that happens when Palestinians go to terrorism school is they get a multiple choice question. And they said, how do you want to kill Israelis? How do you want to kill Jews? How do you want to kill Americans? And the first is suicide bombing. The second is fire Katyusha rocket. The third is kidnapping 3 children and murdering them. And the fourth is killing a single woman who's going for her first job interview. And I always say the officers of the terrorism school get picked by when they say all of the above. Okay, we're dealing with evil incarnate, and instead of America saying what we are doing is we are engaging in a massive resupply of the state of Israel of any and all weapons they need to defend themselves, Obama is telling Israel that he is shutting down Ben-Gurion Airport without discussing it with them. And that is where we are. In the cold, hard light of the morning, that's where we are. Now, I also have to make a huge distinction between the Ukrainian downing of the plane and, as you said, the man pads. Okay, so when you've got an international jetliner, that thing is flying at 40,000 feet. That is a lot of feet, baby. That is high, okay? To knock down a plane that is up 40,000 feet, that takes a serious little missile there, okay? But at Tel Aviv, at Ben-Gurion, they don't need a serious missile. All they need is the man pad that you talked about, because they're landing within the range of the anti-aircraft weapon. They're not flying at 40,000 feet up. They're landing. And you know what happens when you land? You go, or take off, you go slow. So it's not like you've got a plane that's trekking at 600 or 700 miles an hour. You got a plane that's going slow and landing at 100 miles an hour that's on a straight line. So it's worse than a video game. I mean, I only wish it was as complicated. My son, God bless him, he plays these video games. It's easier than a video game. It's almost like a fire, and you don't even have to aim it too hard, and you'll be able to hit him. So what has gone on here? And by the way, let's take a frame back. How did we get here? We got here because of the peace process. Been a fraud from the start. The peace process created a vacuum of Israeli military and police control that allowed more and more lethal and better weapons to come into an area that the Palestinians and the Arabs could then use to kill and maim and murder more Israelis and Americans and Jews. That's the peace process. And the kicker is, why did Israel do this whole peace process? They did it because they wanted to free the Palestinians. Well, this is the irony. They didn't free the Palestinians. They enslaved the Palestinians to Hamas, who's a bunch of marauding, homicidal, mafioso thugs who have proceeded to get rich off of the occupation by Hamas. There's an occupation by Hamas of the Gaza Strip. So the crazy thing is that America and, quite frankly, Israelis bought into a fraud. They bought into a fraud. This is not a peace process. How could anyone say any part of this has ever been a peace process? It has been a terrorist empowering process that is causing Israel, causing the United States, and will cause Western civilization terror and heartache into the future.
Now, Mark, as you know, one of the big challenges that Israel has here is they could win on the ground in 99.999% of the battles and skirmishes and still lose in the PR and the press war. And that's besides this airplane, more like an airport shutdown fiasco, again, to our listeners, you have to understand Ben-Gurion Airport, with Israel surrounded by enemy states, even their frenemies like Jordan and Egypt. Mark, you and I both know perfectly well. I don't know about you. I've traveled over the border I've been in Jordan. I have not been in Egypt, but I've been to those borders, including the borders with Hamas and including the borders with Hezbollah. And you don't take a plane into Cairo and then just rent a car and drive into Israel. You shut down Ben-Gurion, and unless you have a friend with a private jet, and I'm sure right now there's a lot of...
This is a catastrophic event.
Yeah.
There's no question that this is a catastrophic event. And to be honest with you, what has me even more believing that it is actually a manufactured catastrophic event by Obama is Lloyd's of London didn't close Ben-Gurion down. The FAA closed.
Now, please explain briefly to why you can argue Lloyd's of London might be more important in some ways as an analyst than the FAA.
Okay, Lloyd's of London has skin in the game in that Lloyd's of London is the insurance company of the world. And what they do is they are in the professional business of putting out money, getting money from airlines, and saying, okay, if there is a downing or a harming of a plane, we will pay you back the cost of the plane. And not only the cost of the plane, we'll take care of all the insurance for all the lawsuits from any of the passengers. So Lloyd's of London didn't ring this bell. The FAA rang the bell. Meaning Obama rang the bell. So you got to say to yourself, wait a second. The Lloyd's of London didn't close Ben-Gurion down. The Israeli government didn't close Ben-Gurion down. Obama closed Ben-Gurion down. Now, gee whiz, isn't that interesting? So,
Mark, if I may, in the interest of time, let's go ahead and give Obama a temporary respite here on this issue and come at it from another line. Let's say it was the thing to do, for argument's sake.
Fine.
I want to bring up a question for you that I discussed with the last guest, who, in some ways, disagreed with me on these issues, and that is that I believe Hamas is not only not in any way a potential partner for peace, but I believe that they have doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down on their dedication to the absolute total destruction of Israel. So I'm not sure that a vacuum could bring in
Well, let's put it this way. I will take it one step further. This has nothing to do with Hamas. Hamas is a meaningless entity. Unless Iran gave its full imprimatur to start this gig, Hamas ain't doing jack. Okay? Hamas is licks the bottom of Iran's shoes.
They're
so the issue here is Hamas is really not even a player particularly. It's almost irrelevant. Yeah, they hate Israel. They hate Jews. They hate everything. It's Iran, and you could come. It's like coming to an agreement with Abbas. What does it mean to come to an agreement with Abbas? It means absolutely nothing, because Hamas is there. Well, and Islamic Jihad, both funded and armed by Iran. Because you got to remember, where, the Colossus Sea was the ship that was intercepted from Iran, where they had all these 302 millimeter missiles. They're now being fired. Those 302s are the ones that are going almost to Haifa. Okay, they've got a range of about 100 miles, those things. So it's Iran that is the real party. So you could even come, anyone who says you can agree with Hamas and come to a ceasefire or a peace agreement with Hamas is delusional.
Mark, I agree with you. We're coming down. I'm going to have about 2.5 minutes for your closing thoughts. So let me pose the following.
And I will even take it one more step, Sid. Not only are they delusional, you have to understand who's paying them. Okay, no one pays me. I'm not a think tank where I'm got an agenda. Okay, whoever tells any listener that you can come to an agreement with Hamas is lying. Lying. It isn't just a question of errant analysis. It's total bald-faced lies.
Absolutely. So, Mark, we're going to be running short on time. You're going to have about 2 minutes to answer this question, but I think it's very important. So, widen our aperture to Iran. Simple scenario is this. Our president has basically made what I believe to be an absolute mortal, foolish mistake, and I couldn't express the word mortal in stronger terms, by continuing to negotiate and giving Iran more time to get a nuclear bomb. What does that mean to the world? Is this whole thing to some degree serving the interests of Iran? If you think about Hamas being thug puppets for Iran, does this in fact give Iran further distractions so that they can continue having their nuclear bombs? And look at what's happening with these rockets and imagine just one of them contained a nuclear weapon. Mark, you got just under 2 minutes. What are your thoughts?
It stems from the very statement I made earlier. Iran is the one pulling the trigger on these bombs. They're the ones playing the chessboard. And you know what they did? Wasn't it convenient that just when the final quote-unquote negotiations were supposed to be happening or failing or succeeding, all of those negotiations were wiped off the table, and what you had is all of this violence in Israel and the Gaza Strip. Wasn't that convenient? Okay. What this is nothing, is Iran getting a nuclear bomb, and it is a done deal as far as Obama is concerned. He has been a pro-Iranian, anti-Israel, but anti-Saudi Arabian, anti-Sunni. Any Sunni Muslim listening to this show, okay, has got to understand that Obama has a Shiite, pure Shiite, pro-Shiite tilt, not just tilt, lockstep, that is empowering Iran to take over the Middle East. That's it.
Mark,
That's
I agree. I agree fully, and when I see his body language, it speaks volumes of that. Mark, where can people get in touch with your organization, and how can they support your cause?
Number one, I'm the chairman of AFSI, AFSI, Americans for a Safe Israel, or they can just Google my name, Mark Langfan. I am not a paid think tank. I just do this because I believe Obama is empowering Iran to develop a nuclear bomb. So anyone, Google my name. There are plenty of links to my website, marklangfan.com, or AFSI.
This has been excellent. I always appreciate your insight. You're doing the work for the civilized man, and I applaud you for it. Mark, be well, and I wish you and your any of your family in Israel well. We'll have you back again soon.
God bless you, and God bless all of your listeners.
Thank you.
Thank you.